Hey all, today we bring Patrick Page to the show, leading man of stage and screen. You would most recently have seen him in Hadestown as the sultry and sexiest voice of Hades you could probably ever imagine. Hey
Thank
Pat,
you. Hey, how are you?
I'm good. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming on. It's so great to see your face.
Great to see you too.
Yeah. So we start each show cheersing the audience, just kind of connecting across the globe. So whatever your favorite beverage is, if you have handy.
Cheers.
Oh, I couldn't remember cheers.
Yeah.
So I couldn't remember if you were a Jim Beam neat or Maker's Mark neat, but I had Maker's Mark, so.
Makers is better than Jim Beam for me. Please, Jim Beam people, don't get upset.
There you go. So I have Maker's today, so we're meeting somewhere in the middle.
Makers is very good.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
So tell me about I have so many questions for you. I have a notebook right here, and I'm like, I'm never going to get to all these. Talk to me about your time during this, what you've been up to during social distancing.
Well, it's funny. I kind of prepared for this because years ago, I'm a super geek about a number of things. And so I had read up a lot on H1N1 and other pandemics. And back then, I had made a preparation kit. So I had bought several hundred N95 masks, and I'd bought Tamiflu. And
you had a bug out bag.
I did, and I had a plan, and the plan was that Paige, my wife, Paige Davis, and I would head out. If it happened at a time when this was available to us, we would head out to her parents in Avalon, New Jersey. They have a home which they rent out in the summer months, but which is available from, essentially Labor Day to Memorial Day. And so we headed out there immediately as soon as Broadway closed. Now, here's the thing, they say that nobody saw this coming, but on February 25th, I had an appointment with my doctor just for a checkup. And he got a thing from the CDC, and he said, okay, this February 25th, remember, this is 3 weeks before anything closed up. And he said to me, okay, this is coming down. You need to go home. You need to stock up on at least 2 weeks to 3 weeks of groceries, water. You're going to need batteries. You're going to need all of this. And he just told me on February 25th, this is all going to go down.
On February 25th.
Yeah. And so I thought, okay, he knows some stuff that I don't know. So I began preparing, and I began taking things out of my dressing room and bringing them home. And then as it got a little bit closer, I said to my friends in the show, you should take anything you want out of your dressing room, because they're going to call us one day and tell us we're not coming back. And they did. And so I brought my dearest possession in the world is this book.
What is that? Your Shakespeare?
Yes. It's the works of William Shakespeare. It was given to me by my father when I was 9 years old. And if you look, you can see he wrote in the front, June 1st, 1971, to Patrick, may you find much joy in these words, love, Dad. So this is my most treasured possession. It was in my dressing room, and I brought it home. So now it's here with me. And the things that I didn't bring home are all still locked in my dressing room. And I think about them all. I have a speaker that I really would like to have at home. And I've been putting off buying another one. But things like that, I brought home my Tony nomination certificate and things. So I was a little bit, I think, ahead of the curve, certainly ahead of the administration's curve. And so we were ready to go. We headed out essentially the next day.
Was Paige on board when you told her this was happening? Was she like, Pat?
No, Paige is amazing. She, first of all, she's an incredibly disciplined and prepared person herself. So when I told her this stuff, hopefully I haven't told her that many things which have been wrong. So she was like, okay, that's what we're doing. And she was ready to go, and she packed, and, we're a team.
That's awesome. What have you guys been doing to keep yourselves occupied?
Well, some of it is not fit for broadcast, but we have been having a lot of wonderful dinners. Paige has been. She's been cooking. We watched the entirety of Game of Thrones
Oh, nice.
while we were in
Guilty.
Avalon, New Jersey. We've
That
now
was your
watched
first time, right? Because I
my
saw
first
your
time.
posts online, and I was laughing at your posts. I
Oh,
was
yeah.
showing Bill.
Well, and now you see, I said we have to watch this because it's like cultural literacy. You have to know what a Targaryen is. You have to know what a Jon Snow is. You have to know what a Lannister is, in the same way you have to know what a Picasso is or what a Hamlet is. You know, you need to be able to converse. So I said, we got to catch up on this. And then as I did, I got really, really hooked. So now I'm making my way through the books.
I read the books first, and I got really mad at the books.
Mad at the books. Why?
Yeah, I was really livid at the books. I was hooked until book 4. I loved book 4, and then 5. I just felt like it was just everywhere. Where are you now? What book are you?
I'm at the end of book 1. So
Okay, so you're in for a ride.
well, for me, the books are this kind of double experience. On the one hand, I think had I not seen the series, I would have a very hard time keeping all the characters straight. But because I have the casting in my mind and I can see the various people, so if they bring up Jorah Mormont, I have an image of that person in my mind. It's not just a series of syllables, right? And I have a feeling that reading it without seeing the series is a bit like reading War and Peace, just trying to keep all the Russian names straight. You know?
Well, it's also what I like to say is HBO kind of trimmed the fat on the book, because as many people that died in the show, just double that.
Yeah.
Just like double, and you'd be so invested in someone, and they're just dead. They're
gone.
They're
so
gone.
On the other hand, however, because the books are, look, they're not about the prose. I mean, there's some really, really silly similes and metaphors. And as someone who loves well-constructed prose, I have to wince every now and then. But what he is brilliant beyond belief at is plot and character and archetypal characters. So I do grieve a little bit as I'm reading the books that I know what happens next, because the plot is so great. You know, when Bran gets pushed out of the window, what I would give not to know what happens.
Yeah.
You know, but I know what happens. So,
yeah.
So it's a catch-22. I'd be interested in hearing from people what their experience is in terms of reading the books first.
Yeah, the books. We'll talk when you get to the later books, because I'm really curious what you're gonna think as you get to book, knowing that he had such a gap, and that the last book is not out.
Right, exactly.
So,
and yet he told the showrunners what essentially happens in the last book, but he hasn't written it yet.
I know.
Right.
It's a whole thing. But that's really exciting. That's and that's very tying that in, that just has a lot of mythology. Everybody has a character. So I'm totally bringing that and swinging that back around to Greek mythology.
There you go.
Where they all come from, right? All the different character and the archetypes come from. So Hadestown, how badly do you miss your cast right now?
I miss them badly enough that I've listened fully through the album several times while we've been on break, which, if you realize I had to listen to 8 times a week for over 3 years, you realize that's missing people a lot if you want to go back to that material.
Yeah. Well, for you, it's been even longer, right? Because you did the New York workshop first, and then you went to London.
Yeah. So about 4 years. I started in 2016 downtown with a number of labs before we even did a production. We did several labs. Then we did the full New York Theater Workshop production off Broadway. Then we went to Edmonton, Alberta. Then we went to London, the National Theater, and then finally to Broadway. So it's been a 4-year at least journey for me now.
Yeah. And I just have to give a shout out to Rod and Donna, because I would have never gotten the chance to see it. I've seen it twice, and I can't imagine not being able to have that experience. So one of the main things I wanted to talk to you about on the show is where you see the future of theater going. How we're humans. I mean, we're humans. We adapt. You know, we overcome things. The art, technology, and expanding your horizons. But I wanted to get your take on that, especially being an actor, a leading classical actor. You know.
Well, I've thought for a long time that theater needed to justify itself. That when I have the ability to sit home now and watch extraordinary writing, you know, I can stream all however many seasons of Breaking Bad or The Wire or The Sopranos, and it's extraordinary writing and extraordinary direction and acting. So if I have the ability to do that, then you're going to have to work to get me to come out of my house and to gather with other people, particularly if that gathering is going to somehow endanger me. So I've thought for a long time, for many years now, I've thought we've got to justify ourselves. We've got to come up with the ways in which theater is fundamentally different from television or film and point ourselves in that direction. I was doing a remarkable play by Rajiv Joseph in LA and called Archduke. And I thought it was one of the best new plays I'd ever read. And yet in Los Angeles, it had trouble getting a full house. And I thought, well, of course it does, because they all have their home theater systems. They all can stream Netflix, HBO, Showtime. Why in the world would they get on the highway and fight traffic for an hour and pay $100 to come when the fact of the matter is there's so much entertainment available at home? So I've been looking for those ways in which theater can do things that no other medium can do. For example, I did The Lion King for 5 years. Now, you couldn't make a film of the stage version of The Lion King. It would be absurd. The puppetry and all of that would be absurd on film. In the theater, it's thrilling.
Yeah. Can I pause you there? Because I totally stalked your website, and I had to show this because, oh my goodness, because you played Scar.
Yeah.
And I could not wait to show this picture. I was looking at the Lumiere, but this is you.
Yeah, look at that. Look at the mask there.
Look at the detail.
Well, this is something Julie Taymor created. Now, what she called this, if you keep that on the screen, she called this the double event. So what happens in this double event is you're seeing Scar's face up above my head. Mm-hmm. And you can look there if you choose, and you can completely have an experience with that mask. But at the same time, if you look down, you can have an experience with me. And so you're in charge, which is the complete opposite of film. In film, the director's in charge. He tells you, or she tells you, where your eye must go. Mm-hmm. But here, Julie's giving you the opportunity to either look at my face or at the mask, which is above my face. This is also a mechanical mask, so I can move it down in front of my face.
Oh, you're kidding.
Move it. Oh, yeah. It did all kinds of things. And the puppetry was one of my favorite parts of it.
Wow.
And it could move and do quite remarkable things if you learned how to use it well.
How long did it take to get into that?
It took a long, you mean physically to put the costume on? Yeah. Or to, well, you could put that on it took about a half an hour, I suppose.
I mean, mentally is a whole new thing.
Right. Well, you put the face on. The makeup is actually more complicated than it appears in this picture. And that took about an hour to do my face. And then it takes about another 20 minutes to a half an hour to put on the costume.
Wow.
But then to inhabit it and to learn how to run the device, which there's a mechanical cord that runs down to my right hand here. And in my right hand, I've got a switch that operates the mask. Oh. And to learn how to do that in a way that looks interesting and like a lion takes a long time. And I rehearsed that for a long, long time to get good at it. But it was one of the things that I loved about doing that show, was that I learned this whole new skill of this kind of puppetry.
Yeah, I have to, while I have these up, I like the way that you're saying and how you have control of the audience. I mean, I just love these costumes.
I know.
I love it.
This costume is by Julie Taymor. She designed the costumes as well as directing the show.
The Grinch one?
The Grinch is a costume that's not by Julie. I'm afraid that I'm spacing on the genius's name who did the Grinch costume.
The Lumiere one is by Julie.
No, the Lumiere is not by Julie. The Lumiere is by Anne Hould Ward.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, this is by
These are
Julie,
all
the scar
amazing.
costume. Yeah.
Yeah, I had to show those because I couldn't get over the costumes that you've had.
Well, I had to wear a lot of very heavy and big costumes for the first kind of 10 years of my career in New York. That was sort of my specialty, was fleshing out these otherwise two-dimensional characters.
They're incredible. They're incredible. And you as Hades was quite formidable.
Thank you.
Dear sir.
Thank you. I love that character. I love the man.
Yeah, it's a really incredible character. So I wanted to talk to you. I personally kind of knew you as being a person that has studied forensics. You've won awards in forensics in the past. I kind of knew you were going to start a podcast one day. And you have the voice. So I couldn't wait until you started your own podcast. So you started yours. Talk to me about it. Nerd out, please.
It's my dear friend Michael Liddig who's made those things possible for me. He had come to me about 4 years ago and asked me to start an acting studio because I was training actors on a kind of an ad hoc basis. They would come to me when they had a role or an audition, and I would coach people through a role or an audition. And I've been teaching for over 30 years, but I hadn't had, and I taught it in the NYU grad program in New York when I could, but my 8-show-a-week schedule, which I've almost always been doing 8 shows a week while I've been in New York, made that difficult. So Michael came to me and said, you should open your own studio. And I said, it's just way too much work. I can't do that. But I said, Michael, if you do all the work, I'll come in and teach. So you interview the students, you gather the money, you make the website, you do all of that.
I shall show up.
I will show up.
Yep.
And he took it up because he's that kind of extraordinary individual. So in the same way with the podcast, Michael said we should do a podcast. And these conversations we've been having between he and I about art, about life, about Shakespeare, about philosophy, mythology, and so on. He said, let's do a podcast. So I said, okay, you set it up and I'll do it. And so that's what we've been doing. And it's fun. I enjoy it.
Do you have a golden unicorn?
For the podcast?
Everybody has one.
I suppose mine would be Peter Brook. Peter Brook is the world's greatest living stage director. He lives in Paris. And he's written books that were so formative in my life. The most formative book that I ever read was a book called The Empty Space, which he wrote. And I know that since he wrote that, he's continued to develop his ideas over the years. So I once ran into him on the subway station on 59th Street, and I became a 9-year-old girl when I ran into him. My voice went up 3 octaves, and I just told him how much. Yeah, but I just told him how much his work meant to me. But I suppose if I were able to pick one person's brain who's still alive, it would be his.
Okay. Well, that leads me to my next question. Yeah, everybody has their golden unicorn. It's like the list might change, it might evolve, but there's always like 1 or 2 that you're like, oh.
Yeah.
So Phil had a question for you.
Okay.
I asked him, I said, hey, do you have any questions for Patrick's and before I go on? And he's like, I really want to know, being a person that hasn't seen a lot of plays, and you're like the king of plays. You love Shakespeare. You're a very classical actor. What is a play? Wait, I wrote it down that he specifically said, what is a play for people getting into watching plays that you particularly enjoy or like a favorite of yours?
For a person who doesn't go to the theater very much, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, for a person that isn't really a play sort of person. Maybe they went to musicals or...
Such a good question. And of course, it has as much to do with the production as it does with the play. So,
or would you recommend reading a play?
Not usually.
Okay.
I mean, reading a play is like reading the blueprint of a building. It's not a building.
Yeah.
And if you don't know how to read a blueprint, it's not going to make any sense to you. You need to walk through the building. So no, I don't recommend reading plays in that way. Although I don't discourage it. I think some plays read very well. But for example, if you read plays by Chekhov, you're not going to understand the play at all, because the play is not what's on the page. The play is what's underneath the words. People almost always do not say what they mean. And that was an insight that Chekhov had that changed 20th century theater, right? Is that when people are talking, they're not talking about what they seem to be talking about. They seem to be talking about how many lumps of sugar they have in their tea. And what they're really talking about is whether their marriage is going to break up, right? So you actually can't read a Chekhov play with any sort of understanding. It needs to be filtered through artists who understand what the play is actually saying. Having said that, there are plays of Shakespeare which anybody can relate to, but they need to be done well. So, for example, a good production of Hamlet will be a great introduction to theater for anybody, because Shakespeare understood that on the one hand, he had these people in the pit called the groundlings, and they paid a penny and they stood. They didn't get seats. They had to stand. And those people were mostly illiterate, and they weren't concerned with the nature of consciousness or of being, which is what Hamlet is mainly concerned with. But they did love a cracking good ghost story, which is what Hamlet also is, right? And they did understand clowning, and they did. So a production of Hamlet can reach both those people and the people who paid more money in the back, who've maybe studied philosophy and are interested in the nature of consciousness and what it means to be a human being. So I'd say a good production of Hamlet would be a great place to start.
I'm going to have to look online. I'm sure there'll be more and more released, going back to the future of theater and how some people are saying that this might make it more accessible for people, especially children growing up, for not being able to maybe see or afford a stage play, to go see a musical, things like that. I'm sure it'll make it more accessible.
And I used to be, when I was a young man, I wanted to be a classical actor, and I was very snobby about popular forms of entertainment. So when I was offered Lumiere in Beauty and the Beast, I tried to turn it down. But then I realized they were going to pay me a lot more money than anybody else would. So I took the part. And while I was doing it, I realized that my snobbishness was very ill-placed, because what we had there was this really archetypal story about transformation, about seeing beyond appearances, about the transformative nature of love, and that it's packaged in such a way that a person of 9 or 10 or 11 years old can participate in those ideas. So, and I began to see, well, my father ran a children's theater when I was a boy, so I should have known this before. And I began to see that you could have big ideas in any form. You can have big ideas in a cartoon. I don't personally watch The Simpsons, but I understand that in The Simpsons, there are big ideas being tossed around in this very kind of primitive animated form, right? So I let go of a lot of my snobbishness after that.
Well, I'm glad you did, because it seemed like it was an incredible performance.
Well, not only that, but I met my wife during Beauty and the Beast. So
I didn't know you and Paige met during Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah, we met on the first national tour of Beauty and the Beast. So it changed my life.
Wait, what was Paige during in Beauty and the Beast? Or was
She started out in the ensemble. She was the center plate, and you couldn't take your eyes off of her. And then later,
she's a wonderful dancer. I love dancing. Paige.
And then later on, she graduated to being Babette. So we played opposite each other.
Oh my God. You too.
Yeah.
So have you been doing during social distancing? I'm sure you've been practicing a lot of your magic.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Oh, I have a routine that I want to show you, but it will not work on Zoom. But I've come up with the best routine of my life.
Next time we see each other, because we bond over magic a lot, and I was trying to kind of think of a way that I could surprise you today while you're social distancing and bring a little magic into your life, because I'm sure you're just working your own tricks and all that. So I wanted to bring my friend Lee Turbosic on. Who's a magician. So he will be joining. He's coming on specifically to do a magic trick for you.
Excellent.
Patrick.
Hi, Lee. Hey, oh, this is great.
Good to see you guys.
Good to see you too.
Oh, these are some of my favorite people on two screens. This is great.
So I got a trick ready. You want to do some magic?
Neat.
I'm ready.
Awesome. All right, great. So I'm going to just do a card trick for you. We're going to get these spun up really nice stuff for a minute.
Excellent.
These are not what you're going to expect, though. I'm going to move the screen. There we go. These are what I call marked cards. All right, marked cards. These have just kind of a barcode on the side, but they're shuffled, right? So shuffled cards.
Yeah.
Barcoded up like that. Now here's what I'm gonna do. In a second, I'll do something with the barcode. But before I do that, Patrick, what I want you to do is I just want you to say stop. We're gonna get a random playing card. Be fair about this. You say stop anywhere you like.
Stop.
Right there. We'll pick up. And I'm gonna turn away for a second so you can see what this top card is. Because I could actually look at this one right now, but I'm not. But I'm gonna put that up like that so you can see it.
Okie dokie.
And then I'm gonna come back. Okay. So we'll put that back into the deck. Now I want you to watch the ink on the barcode. So what if I were to separate them in half, Patrick, and I were to give these cards a shuffle right now, right about there? Watch the ink. If you watch the ink, you'll start to see.
Ah, beautiful.
The Myth, the musical, right there.
Oh, that's cute.
Hadestown right there. Four times. We'll give the cards another cut. We'll give the cards another Hadestown shuffle right there. Watch the ink this time. You see you guys are obviously growing in popularity.
Beautiful.
Right
2 Hadestowns.
2 of them right there. And then we'll give them one more cut. We'll give the cards one more Hadestown shuffle, and we'll get one
Hades. Oh, beautiful.
Right, the Grammy award-winning Hadestown right there.
Yes.
Now, in the very beginning, Patrick, I showed you these cards well shuffled, remember?
You did.
What I didn't tell you is that my fingers were working overtime for you, putting every card back.
Oh!
Ace through king, king through ace, king through ace. Every card is now in perfect sequential order. But you see, I still have a little problem. It says Hadestown, but you're now thinking of a playing card right there. So what I'll do is I'm going to rearrange the Hadestown ink on the pack. And if I rearrange it just correctly, I should be able to shake up Hadestown and tell you, Patrick, that you were actually thinking.
Beautiful!
So there you go. A little magic.
Bravo.
Thank you very much.
That was great. Thanks, Lee.
Appreciate that so much. So
beautiful.
Well, hey, hopefully we get to hang out again next time. I'm either in New York City or you're in Pittsburgh.
Absolutely.
So, Marta,
thank you for that. That was beautiful.
Thanks, Lee.
Good hanging with you guys. I'll see you again.
You too.
That was so cute.
That was beautiful.
I had no idea what he was going to do. That was awesome.
I love it. So personal.
Yeah, that was, I love I love magic. And I've realized that apparently Zoom is a pretty good place actually online to do it.
I've seen people, yeah, apparently I was going through Netflix last night, and one of the top 10 shows is a magic show. I haven't watched it yet, right?
Yeah.
But incidentally, when we were talking about how theater makes itself relevant, I think magic is one of those things that, although Zoom can be effective, there's still this slight suspicion because you're not in the room. You're like, okay, did he take, I know he didn't, but did he take it out of frame and get a different deck or whatever, right? But like, if you're in the room, there's no way to deny it when you're in the room. It's live theater.
Oh my goodness. I know. I love it. I do love magic. My dream is that all of us could go to the Magic Castle one day.
I love the Magic Castle. I still have the only reason I've kept my International Brotherhood of Magicians membership for all these years is from when I go to LA so I can get into the Magic Castle.
Mm-hmm. I've been twice, and I'm hoping that once this is passed, we can go back.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. This has been such a joy. I was so excited to talk with you. You guys, go check out the podcast.
Yes, my podcast is available on Apple, on Spotify, and everything. It's called the Patrick Page Podcast, and hopefully you will enjoy. And I also want all of your listeners to follow me on Instagram.
Yes,
and on Twitter.
Will.
It's Page Patrick, at Page Patrick. Just go Page Patrick, my last name, my first name.
Page Patrick, and your website is patrickpageonline.com, right?
That is correct.
Okay. Guys, follow Patrick Page. He is a lovely human being and a ridiculously talented actor. MartaOnTheMove.com, Twitter at ICan'tFindMarta. Thanks, everybody, for joining in. Thanks, Pat.
Thank you. See you later.